Begin. Okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to All Talk with OGGN Guyana. My name is Charles Sugrim, your host tonight, and I want to thank all of you for joining us. We want to thank those on radio, 99.1, 99.5 FM. We also want to thank all those who will be joining us on YouTube and on Facebook. Please give us a thumbs up and share it to your friends and family. Let them know that OGGN is on the air. Today we are having our last program for the year, and we had to course our guest because he's not feeling so well. He's under the weather, but he's no stranger to us. Dr. Vincent Adams was a former executive director of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and he has a wealth of knowledge in what we are talking tonight. Tonight's topic is tracking Guyana's oil money, how much and where it is going. Who else can help us channel us through this passage? No other than Dr. Vincent Adams. Dr. Adams, welcome to the program tonight.
Thanks, Charles, and welcome to all of our wonderful listeners out there, and I look forward to the session. Of course, like you said, I've got a little bit of cold or something with my throat is a little bit out, but I won't let that deter me.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. And Dr. Adams, before we start the program tonight, we want to, on behalf of OGGN Guyana, we want to extend our deepest condolences to you and the family on the passing of your cousin, who was one of the GDF helicopter that crashed recently. I know you are in Guyana for his funeral, so we know it has impacted you and the family a lot. Do you want to tell us anything about that incident?
Sure. First of all, it was pretty tough on the entire family because Michael is I don't think you can find another human being that is so selfless and has done so much for most people. He gives up himself for others and for his country, by the way. But, it was tough on us, but we were very much comforted by the kind of support that we got, throughout the entire, from the time the accident until he was buried, and even beyond that, I think, I've never been to a state funeral before, but I don't know if they called it a state funeral, but that was definitely, I don't think a state funeral could be better than that. We had basically, the funeral took an entire day with 4 different ceremonies. And the one thing I want to thank His Excellency, the President and the Prime Minister and the Chief of Staff for being throughout the entire day at all 4 ceremonies. And, to show their compassion and just to share their condolences with and support with the families. I want to thank them and thank every one of us who gives support. And one of the things about Michael, by the way, that is close to home for me, Michael, as we know, took all the pictures. He's probably the only person who has a picture or video of every single square inch of Guyana. He did that. Not only, we look at these videos and colorful videos about waterfalls and Guyana fauna and flora, and we enjoy that. But Michael does it because of his love for nature. I think he's the only person who's flown the entire face. He lowered the helicopter throughout the entire face of the Kaito Falls, and it's on video. But one of the things that he did, a lot of people didn't realize, and I had to disclose it at the funeral because he was basically my secret weapon at the EPA. Since we couldn't get access to certain parts of the interior where they used to be mining, he took it upon himself because he was not too happy as to what some miners were doing with just destroying some of our major rivers and waterways. And he would go take videos and bring it to me, and secretly, and would take it to the EPA, and we would take necessary actions, and nobody knew where we were getting this information from because we didn't have any kind of access. But that was the kind of person that he was, and not that he was telling on these contractors. And by the way, that was in the past administration, so it wasn't about politics either. But that was the kind of person he is. He did it. He took the pictures not only for its beauty, but to make sure that what was happening out there was, was beneficial and was the right thing to do as far as the country environmental, situation was concerned, to protect the
I'm glad you
environment.
mentioned that, Dr. Adams, because as you said, those gold mines, the regular ones that they're doing, they're really the rivers are so silted now. They're silted that the Amerindian community don't have fresh water anymore. They're
Yep.
really suffering, and I really would have hoped that the authorities would take action on it, but it seems as though that is not happening. The Winey River, which is one of the largest black water area we have, it is getting silted now. The rivers that connect to the Winey, it's really sad, but that is true. But Dr.
And
Adams, I'm
beside
glad
the
you
silt,
mentioned.
quickly, Charles, beside the silt, these dredges in the middle, what they would do, they would dredge and dump the dredge material right there in the river, some feet or yards away from it. So they're putting artificial islands in the river, and they're even changing the flow path of the river, and eroding the banks of the rivers, and changing the river run and everything else. I mean, it's a major destruction that when I was at the EPA, we were putting a lot of focus on fixing those. I don't know what the plan is right now, but I think it's an emergency.
Yeah, I think so. I really think that the small miners, they should have put a moratorium on them now, which is stop issuing license to small miners because of, and we're coming to the oil, because we're talking the oil sector now. But Dr. Adams, your cousin, Lieutenant, is it Brigadier Lieutenant?
Lieutenant Colonel, Lieutenant
Lieutenant
Colonel.
Colonel Charles. He and all the members of the military, and we got to give our hands up to the members of the military. They have sacrificed their lives to protect our country.
Yeah.
We have known whether it's the New River Triangle or the Ankoko, wherever they did, they fought valiantly to protect our country. Now God has blessed us with oil. We've got oil now into our country, into the equation, but yet the military and every other sector of the economy is being deprived of the benefit of our oil sector. OGGN, as you know, Dr. Adams, was calling for, or is calling for 55 barrels for every 100 should be given to Guyana for Guyana's development. That will do enormous benefit to the military, to every sector of Guyana. How can Guyanese effectively advocate for a renegotiation of the oil contract, in your view?
Well, Charles, I think there's been lots of advocate, and as you remember, I started speaking about this from day one when I was asked to review the contract, and one of the things that what my biggest recommendation, if you go back and look into I think it was February 4th, 2018, front page of the Kaieteur News. I know the OGGN has it on his as one of the articles there listed on the front page. I called for exactly this: is to renegotiate the contract, to take $1 billion in signing bonus, and also to forget about this PSA contract and go with a concession type contract, which is what the OGGN is also asking. Whereas for every 100 barrels of oil, we take 55, they take 45. You don't have to, all these audits and shenanigans about cost oil and verifying costs would go away. All we've got to do is make sure that the meter is running correctly. And we've got a lot of mechanics and electricians out there to make sure to be on site, to check the meters, to calibrate the meters properly. And all we've got to know is to count those barrels and to make sure that meter is running. That's all. For every 100 barrels that comes out of that well, we take 55. We can count 55. They take 45. That is all. All this auditing about cost of going to parties and paying for ex-ministers to go to Singapore and to go to Texas and using money inappropriately. That would not be necessary anymore. So absolutely, but like I always keep saying, Charles, the people have got to hold the government accountable. People are staying too quiet. Fortunately, we have, groups such as the OGGN, Kaicho News, of course. We've got Christopher Ram and all the other folks who are calling for renegotiation, including the president and vice president. You recall their quotes. They basically said that the past government has given away the nation's patrimony. We were getting ripped off, and as soon as they get into office, they will renegotiate. The president said that. The vice president said that very loudly in Parliament. I mean, he's on video. He may want to deny it as much as he can. He is on video. So I don't know. Maybe the people need to hold them accountable again to say you. And even today, I was looking at his press conference. One of the things that he always maintains at all of his press conference is that they keep their promises. They keep their promise. Well, Mr. Vice President, I and rest of the Guyanese people are challenging you to keep your promise to renegotiate that contract for a better deal with you. Have acknowledged. And by the way, Mr. Vice President, the sanctity of the contract says that you can renegotiate the contract. So when you talk about sanctity, it's written into the contract that says, I think it's 42, I think it's section 40. It says Article 40. I think it's Article 42, but it says that you can renegotiate the contract as long as the other party agreed to it. But we have, besides all the talk about renegotiate, there's no evidence that any of the two governments has ever asked, not even asked Exxon to renegotiate. So, Mr. Vice President, I want for you on behalf of the entire nation to go in the interest of the people, like Charles said, to know we need this money to build up our military. We've got, teachers that should get a bigger raise. We've got still half of the population that is living on $5 or less per day. So, if you renegotiate and you follow the recommendation of OGGN, you will have a better nation, and the people would start benefiting. So please, at least challenge Exxon, let Exxon say no, and then we'll see what happens from there. But at least ask Exxon to renegotiate.
And to our audience out there, we want again to apologize to Dr. Adams. His voice is not this vibrant person that he normally is because of the cold that he got. So for those on radio, those on YouTube and Facebook, we do ask your apology. Dr. Adams is not. We thank God that he's here with us today for this interview. Dr. Adams, as you said, the oil block has been de-risked.
Yes.
There is no risk no more.
Yes.
What I don't quite understand, if the PPP, the government, was in opposition at this time, they would have been hounding the government Absolutely. To renegotiate and get a better deal for Guyana. Now that the shoe has changed, they just seems complacent. And I hope that the people of Guyana, whatever means they can, that they will really rise up, get a better deal, because Guyana, all of you Guyanese, every single one of you deserve a better deal. Even those who support the government at this time for renegotiation, if there is renegotiation, and there should be one, you will also benefit from it. Last week, Dr. Adams, I had two wonderful women from Retreat, two Guyanese, and they explained to us in detail some of the hardship that they're going through despite 4 years of oil production. This year, Exxon will be generating almost $24 billion in revenue, US, 24 billion US. How much of that come to Guyana? How can these people benefit from our sector? That oil belongs to Guyanese. The gold belongs to Guyanese. The forest belongs to Guyanese, not to a government. So how can the people benefit from this our oil?
Again, again, the oil belongs to the people. Okay? The oil belongs to the people. And there's no excuse for us to be talking and bragging about Guyana being the richest country, the highest growth, the highest GDP growth by far of any nation in the world. But half of the population, is still living on less than $5 a day for after 4 years. It's not a case, it's not a case, Charles, and our audience, where we've got millions of people that we've got to support in Guyana. We do not even have a million. We barely have 750,000. Everybody in Guyana should have been rich by now if the money was well distributed. Again, it comes down to priority. You know, this government seems to think that infrastructure is the key. Well, infrastructure doesn't reach the people. Infrastructure, as a matter of fact, the new paradigm is that you start in any development, you start with education and security and agriculture, those things. Right now, we've got a nation that is starving, that needs health care, that needs a home, and that should be the priority. Every time up to today, I hear, and this is not about politics and the vice president and me or anything else. Up to today, the vice president insinuated that all the people like myself and you want to talk about is feeding the people. Those were his words. He said that in a previous press conference. What could be more important than feeding poor people? They cannot eat roads and they cannot eat shore bases. But that's where the focus is. Instead of focusing on regular people and to make sure that they get a share of the pie, they're focusing on their friends and families. Their friends and families who have no idea how to do anything, but they're getting contracts and they have no qualification. They're into all different stuff that never was a contractor, never built a full pen, but are getting these major contracts for hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's where the money is going. And it's unfair, and it's basically, it's immoral, to be honest. It's immoral.
And not only that, Dr. Adams, but those contracts are borrowed funds. They're not funds from the oil sector. So we're giving away, as Christopher Ram said today, billions of dollars to the oil companies, and we're going on borrowing to develop our country. So when the people said to us, "Oh, look what the government is doing. Look how many things going up." As Retret said last week, Halima Miscan, you can't eat road, you can't eat a bridge, you can't eat infrastructure. Why don't we have a government that is caring? Today, as we speak, and we know the heat wave in Guyana is still going on, where you were there recently.
Yeah.
Think of it: the president, the vice president, the prime minister, all the ministers have air-conditioned office. The schools where our children are supposed to learn, the schools are so hot that the students cannot learn. What kind of generation are we making when basic infrastructure we are doing, the children cannot even study in an environment that is conducive to learning?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. You go as far as, since you're going to talk about schools, is it just a few weeks ago, UNICEF, WHO, and the World Bank report came out, and Guyana has the highest malnourished rate for kids in the entire region, the Caribbean and Latin America. It has five times, Charles, the malnourishment rate of the average in this region, Latin American, Caribbean. It has, listen to this, we always knew that Haiti has been perennially amongst if not the poorest, amongst always the poorest country, maybe in the entire world, but in this hemisphere. We have twice the malnourishment rate of Haiti, of all places. And then we label as the richest country and the the country with the highest growth rate. I mean, when we see that you're looking at I think a pound of tomatoes is $1,000. A slice of pumpkin is what, whatever the 1,000 or $1,200. That is absolutely ridiculous. But that is what we have, and the government, all they're talking about is is infrastructure. It's interesting that you mentioned borrowing. You were absolutely correct. Here we are. We've out of the 24, I think we now put we into our coffers. We've got like three billion, but we're still borrowing. I mean, and then today I listened to the vice president, and he says, "Well, this here's basically this is we are talking as if we don't know how to manage our home household, and yeah, and that's not the way you manage. If you manage what I call kitchen table economics, if you got money, you're not going to go borrow money unless you can get a higher interest rate for the money that you have. And we're not even getting any interest rate because it's parked someplace. I think we're getting, you know better, about 1% or 1 point something percent.
The experience has been very low, yeah.
But they don't even want to disclose how much we're paying in the interest for that money, so it doesn't make any sense. And he's saying, well, we don't want to borrow money. And it's exactly that what we're doing. This misinformation to the people. We're borrowing money. He's saying, well, we don't want to borrow money. Here's where he's making an excuse to not put in the money where the people, to feed the people, etc. He said, well, we can't do everything at the same time. But which means that he does not view that as a priority. He said, we've got to build these gas, sure, we've got to do this, but which means those are their priorities and not feeding the people. He's made that very, very clear. And that is
and Dr. Adams, again, what director of OGGN, Mr. Alfred Balai, he said, if they can put solar roof on those schools,
absolutely,
that will produce enough energy to give them air conditioning if they have to use air conditioning. And not only that, of course, they have to maybe redo the ceiling and so on to seal the building. But they have the money now from our oil and gas that can do that for our children to have a better learning experience, but it's not happening. But let's move on, Dr. Adams. Last week, Mr. Chris Ram, as you know, you mentioned him talking about, he's one of the strong advocates for renegotiation. He said on December 15th in his Topic News column, and I want to quote, his column is "Every man, woman, and child in Guyana must become oil-minded." In part 116, he said, the vice president might not have intended it, but every time he allows a variation of relinquishment, unjustified force majeure, or the use of government share of profit oil for exploration, he's effectively changing the spirit and provisions of the agreement, practically renegotiating it. Yet the government parrots the substitute about the sanctity of contract. I know you speak of it earlier, but what are your thoughts on what Mr. Ram spoke on the sanctity of contract?
No, I agree with Mr. Ram. I've always said, Charles, you've listened to me. There is no sanctity of contract. This is convenience talk. Okay, I change the contract. I keep saying that all the time, with two things that I put into that contract. And Exxon agreed to it, which was the full liability coverage. Okay, that was no part of it. They resisted it, but they went along with it, which is what's in the code, by the way. And of course, the other thing that was in that contract, the government had to give them 7 days notice to visit the site. I said, you got to be out of your mind. I put it into the permit that we shall have unimpeded access up to and including unannounced visit. Those things are in the permit. So this whole thing about the sanctity of contract is absolute nonsense. How come, if we had a sanctity of contract, how come the time had expired for audits, but we're still doing audits? So you can't use these things. And a key part of it about the sanctity of contract, the sanctity of contract also says that you can ask to renegotiate the contract, you can request, and you can renegotiate the contract as long as the other party agrees. We have not even had the gall to ask Exxon, which would be an easy ask to say, or to to demand that we renegotiate, even though the vice president and president before that said that, oh, you guys are giving away this our patrimony as soon as we get in renegotiation. So absolutely, I agree with Chris. We are basically putting our money in the hands of Exxon that we should be getting for them to for the big profit, record profit for Hess and all of them to have big profit, while we're still starving. While we're still starving. You know, this whole thing about ring fencing, when I hear the president, it sickens me when I hear the president. Well, it's money that is delayed. Hell, I want my money now. So that I can, and then let me invest my money in education, in feeding the people, in providing housing, healthcare, agriculture for that long-term sustenance. Don't tell me I'm going to wait. And we all know, we've talked about this, the OGGN folks, and we predicted that we will never pay out for these contracts, so we will never see that real 50%. I want my money now. Renegotiate the contract. Give us ring fencing, but don't hide under this sanctity. Well, we've got ring fencing, so we can't do anything about it. You said, Mr. Vice President and Mr. President, that we will renegotiate this contract. Again, you know, you need to stay to follow your word and abide by it. That's what you promise the people. That's what you need to deliver.
And we don't even know what the interest rate that Exxon is charging us for the money that they use.
Exactly.
That is also secretive.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to All Talk with OGGN Guyana. With me is Dr. Vincent Adams, former executive director of the EPA. And tonight we're talking of the tracking Guyana's oil money, how much and where it is going. You're listening to us on 99.1, 99.5 FM radio, and also on YouTube and Facebook. Give us a thumbs up if you like our program. And you can go to our website, oggn.org. There's a lot of information there. Dr. Adams wrote a lot of letters and documents. All those things are in oggn.org website. Dr. Adams.
Yes, sir.
Last month, November 15, 2023, this year, it was announced that Payara, the third oil project, started production. There seems to be, and it's true, that APNU signed the original contract. But this current government is saying that they are bound by, again, sanctity of contract, that Guyana cannot improve its position. APNU, however, in their time, they approved two projects, Liza 1 and Liza 2. But this current government has subsequently approved three projects, Payara, Yellowtail, and Ura. The current government has ignored the opportunity of demanding ring fencing, as you just slightly mentioned, before approval of the three new projects that they have actually approved. That is within the Stabroek contract, which could have brought billions of dollars US to Guyana. How would you articulate to the audience that Guyana can improve its position with ring fencing, even with the current Stabroek contract?
Well, again, all the government has to do is they can't change it unless you renegotiate the contract. As a matter of fact, you know what I've always said, that Exxon knows where the power lies. When I was there, I proved that. But if we behave as if they're in charge, that's the way that if we behave that way, that's the way they're going to treat us. When I was at EPA, the entire country knew that I was driving the ship there. I was captain in that ship. When I told Exxon to do, they had to do whatever. That full liability coverage was a great example. And as soon as they got rid of me, they decided to can it, and it ended up in a court of law. So all the government has to do is, again, ring fencing. Meaning, and ring fencing means that every project is fenced off. All of the investment, if you make, for example, I think Liza 1 the original cost was like $3.6 billion. That should have been, all the accounting should have been for Liza 1 alone. We have already finished paying for Liza 1. If we had ring fenced Liza 1, we would have been getting 50%, not 12.5%. We would have get 50% plus the 2% royalty. Okay, we would have getting 50 plus, whatever, 50 plus 12, about 60%, right? When you finish the calculation. But right now, we paying a 75%, and it's not a cap. We paying a 75% cost, and a lot of people believe. I saw writers and everybody saying that we're paying 70. We don't know how much we're paying. What it is, just to give us our measly 12.5%. What the contract did, the contract said, well, what you're going to do, we're going to limit you to 75% cost. So you're going to take out your cost every month, but it cannot add up to more than 75% of the production. So 75% goes to Exxon for their expenses, and 25% remains, and then you share that 50-50. So that's how we get our 12.5%. If we had removed that, if we had ring fencing, that whatever the cost is, and I don't know what it is, but we would have been getting more. We would have getting that real 50% plus probably the 12.5% or whatever the profit is. We would have been getting half of the profit. So that's the dilemma. We're losing at least 50%. Now, if the same thing for Liza 2, my understanding is that we finished paying for Liza 2. So we would have been getting double. As a matter of fact, Liza 2 produces more than Liza 1. I think it's like double. So we would have been getting that lots of that extra money. But it really boggles my mind when I hear the vice president says, well, we're going to get that money later on. Now, here's the other catch, Charles. The 75%, it's just a limit that they can take out. It could be costing us 90% or 95% every month. That extra 20%, if it's 95, above the 75%, it goes over into the next month, and the next month, and the next month. So it's like you paying, let's say you have a credit card, and every month you go and you buy $100 worth of goods, but you're only paying $75 on that credit card. So it's building up, and then you're paying interest on top of what you keep building up all the time. That's what we're having, and that is why we've come to the conclusion that we will never pay out for the 6 projects to date. It's like $56 billion plus the operating costs. By the way, $56 billion right now. So we've got to pay that the entire $56 billion plus the other 4 projects that will be coming online. So we will never pay it out. So we will continue to get 14.5% throughout the entire life of the project, whereas we could have been getting 60+% throughout the life of the project. And we would have been getting it upfront, where everybody would have been gaining money right now today. People would not have been suffering. We would have been getting that money today from Liza 1 and Liza 2.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. But for our audience, I just want to put it very simply what Dr. Adams said there in context. What Dr. Adams is telling us is that currently we have already paid off for Liza 1 and maybe Liza 2. Now, what the contract is to give Guyana is 2% royalty and 12.5% out of 25, which is the 75 cap he spoke about. So Guyana is getting 14.5% currently as we speak. If the government of Guyana was able to ring fence these different projects, let's assume, let's say the revenue is $100. Now we have to take out the operating expense, which is about 30%. So of that $100, $30 will go to operating expense. The $70 that remain, Guyana will get $35 of 70. So the oil company get 35, we get 35. Now, plus we get 2 from them. So they get 33, we get 37. So we would have received $37 per barrel instead of $14.50. That is the difference. So we're giving up $20 of every barrel that we produce, or whatever we produce, we're giving up that to the oil companies. And as Dr. Adams said, in perpetuity, we don't know when this capital cost will be recouped because we don't know what the interest expense they're charging us. They keep adding on to it because they're drilling new wells and they keep adding it on, and the cap of 75% will continue for as long as you and I might be alive. But they'll have to, they're saying, no, that will not happen. But as Dr. Adams said, give me my money now. I don't know what will happen in the future. Give us our money now so Guyana can develop. Dr. Adams, the 6 projects that we have talked about, LISA 1, LISA 2, and so on, Yellowtail, and so on, they cost about 55 billion, 56 billion. The IHS market and the Haynes report that just came out, that were covered in the media, what is your opinion on the need for a forensic audit going forward compared to the audit that was done for the 7.5 billion in expense that was done by Haynes and his team?
Well,
what is your view of forensic audit? What is your view of a forensic audit rather than the audit that was recently done?
Well, just for folks to understand what a forensic audit is compared to a regular audit or an internal audit. A forensic audit is if you have doubts that, or if you have questions about if there is fraud or suggestions of fraud or potential fraud, meaning that, you know, there's some suspicious reporting of information that, well, there's enough evidence. In the 2 audits that have been conducted so far, we remember the $214 million a fiasco, and now we're seeing the other audit by Haynes and company, where there are lots of questionable charges. And as a matter of fact, the Haynes and company audit shows that it was just a sample that they took. I think, if I remember the numbers, there were 260,000 items that were audited. You don't expect them to audit everything, but so they took a sample, and then they used terms like big and small and less than $1,000, but nobody knows what those items are. So a forensic audit now, because there's so many questions, had the audit not been conducted, it would have slipped through the crack. So now we knew that audits have caught these type of things, and they've not been a thorough audit. When you hear the company does not even want to tell us what the production data is, that should be a no-brainer. You know, they've been reporting production data. Why wouldn't they want to give that basic data to the auditors? That is suspicious to me. And remember now, they lost the case when they fired. I think it was in Texas. They fired 2 scientists who reported that they were inflating the production data so that the books would look better in terms of leveraging and those type of things. They fired 2 scientists because they disclosed that information. So here's a company that, and by the way, there are even allegations and lawsuits in Africa, in the United States, where it was alleged, and it says fraud too, where it's alleged that they have not been reporting the data accurately to the government. So here's a company with that record. So here it is. We even give them an opportunity. We did 2 audits, and we're finding all kinds of stuff that is evidence that to me would require that we do a forensic audit to prove whether it was necessary or not after when we do the audit.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, but forensic audit goes very deep into the actual accounting and the system. There is inherent risk, and there's so many risks associated with oil production that a regular audit will not be able to bring forward. So we can go down as the audit reported that there is like this checkered web. One layer gives to the other layer, and then it's distributed to another set of layer, and so on. That's what this oil company do. And the only way to unravel that is to spend some more money. Of course, a forensic audit will be more expensive, but it brings out much more, and you will see where the shenanigans are. I mean, there are many on there are reports out there that a lot of things are going on out in the Atlantic with the ships and the supply ships as well, the supply vessels. And a forensic audit will uncover a lot of those things. But will the government do that? I doubt it.
Let me add quickly here within the same context. And this is the reason why, when I was at the EPA, we worked with the World Bank to develop a petroleum unit at the EPA, a 36-member unit with high-powered petroleum and accounting and all the different categories to be on the ships 24/7 to see for ourselves, not to depend upon a report. That's what I'm saying. All of these audits in terms of how you monitor to be in compliance, it could be even these audits could even be avoided if you have on-site knowledgeable people there. They would know what the production date is. They would know how these meters are running. You can't hide anything. But what happened as soon as I left, the government, in collusion with them, just canned all of that. And that is why we're here. And Exxon is just enjoying it. Exxon is having a good time.
Dr. Adams, I know that we talked about this parent company guarantee, and you mentioned that you instituted that when you were the head of the EPA. But the case is currently in the court with the parent company guarantee. We don't know what will happen. When will the Court of Appeal make a final determination? But given the size of oil spills around the world, and one of the big ones that comes to mind is the Macondo oil spill in the Gulf, estimated about $145 billion to clean up. Now we are adding more projects. We're adding Payara, we're adding, urea, and all this Yellowstone coming on stream soon. That increased the likelihood of an oil spill. Because as we know, even in Liza 1 and 2, they're pumping more than the recommended safety production, right? They're going way above the safety standard. Shouldn't the government pause for the approval of new oil projects until this case has been resolved? Don't you think the government should pause and say, hey, no more development, no more license for production?
That's what I would have done. As a matter of fact, I told Exxon that's what I was planning on doing. You remember in Liza 1 was signed before I arrived. Liza 1 did not have parent company guarantee. It was supposed to be self-insured. But of course, the EPGL, the subsidiary, had no assets to cover it. So when Liza 2 came on my desk, I said, I will not sign Liza 2, and you will not produce another barrel of oil if you do not provide parent company guarantee. So that was how it was put into the permit. And that is how it stayed in the permit, except that when I left, they added that clause that says they will determine what that parent company guarantee is, which is the $2 billion, which was shot down by Judge Kissoon. So absolutely, and what they're doing now is increasing the risk. You're absolutely correct. The more operations you have, the probability increases. And on top of that, they're even violating the risks that are identified in the environmental impact assessment, which is what we call the Bible of risk assessment and how you mitigate against risk and how you respond to risk. They are exceeding the safe operating limit, which put the projects at a higher risk of a spill. And then on the backside, you don't want to have any kind of parent company guarantee. Listen to this. For the whiptail, which is one of the newer projects that are coming on board, at a public meeting, the Exxon projects manager, I think Mr. Jackson, you know what he said? He told the people when they asked him about this parent company guarantee and full liability, he said, well, if they do that and they have a spill, they would bankrupt the oil companies. So if they have a spill, what he's saying, if it could bankrupt Exxon, that means it would bankrupt Guyana. That's what he's saying. That's what he said. If we have a spill, it would bankrupt the oil companies. It's in the headlines. Which means that if it could bankrupt Exxon, They don't care whether it bankrupt. Not only Guyana, by the way, but the entire Caribbean. There was a study done to see what an oil spill would do to the Caribbean. And I'm not talking about the cleanup part. It would cost the Caribbean, in terms of the economy of the Caribbean, $140 billion. So on top of that, now it's the cleanup cost, which, as you said, was it 145 from the Macondo spill. So that is what we're facing, and they really don't care. They say if we have a spill, it's going to bankrupt Exxon. If it bankrupt Exxon, that means they're admitting that it would bankrupt Guyana and the Caribbean. By his own words, that's what he said.
Very sad, but that is what is happening. Dr. Adams, if the Environmental Protection Agency in Guyana operated like the EPA of the vulnerable countries surrounding the North Sea, how would the oil extraction by ExxonMobil be better monitored?
Oh, the only monitoring system, and I've learned that from working all my years in the United States government, the only reliable monitoring is to have qualified people at the site. Qualified people at the site. You know, when I hear this nonsense about satellite, it's the most foolish thing that I've ever heard. You cannot monitor. First of all, a satellite, it's like taking pictures. Okay, all the operations is on the ship. You cannot see what's going on the inside of the ship, where all the gauges and valves and everything are. So you may see, if you get a big enough oil spill, you may see that oil spill, but that would be too late. Monitoring is to prevent something from happening, is to make sure you have people there to be checking. Let's say you got a permit that have certain requirements. You've got your folks who understand what to check for. They're walking around, looking over people's shoulders, looking at the equipment to make sure it's operating correctly, and making sure that if there is a maintenance problem, it's maintained, but everything is a compliance with that permit. To have from the monitor, it's not seeing any of that. The only thing it would see is if you have a big major spill. You can't even see a small spill. You're going to see a big major spill, but then it would be too late. You don't need satellite after you get a big spill with oil all over the Caribbean. That would be too late. So all this foolishness about monitoring by satellite, it's nonsense. Again, they canned the World Bank and the EPA document with the plan to have people on board, and that's why we're in it. And that's what Exxon wants, by the way. That's exactly what Exxon wants.
Dr. Adams, do the people of Guyana know exactly how much gas, liquid, solids waste is actually being produced by the three floating bridge we have out there? And what can EPA do to strengthen the system to ensure that Exxon comply with basic standards, like maybe like the North Sea standard?
Here, look, and and by the way, you know, just to give you a little history, the North Sea, there was an accident in, when was it, 1987, the Piper Alpha spill in the North Sea that resulted in 167 lives. 167 lives, and it was caused by a simple, not following a simple procedure of a pump that was out of maintenance. A pump. These things don't take a whole lot to cause a problem. A pump was out of maintenance. They did not follow the procedure. In exchanging the ship that came on board did not realize the pump was out of maintenance because they were too busy. They did not exchange. They switched that pump into operation. The next thing you know, it was gas. The whole ship was on fire. 167 people lost their life because of that accident. That's where most of the environment safety operating offshore standards were set up because of that accident, because of that incident off of Aberdeen. So we should be, again, we should be following international standards, and we're not. For example, this whole thing about the EIA, is very important. You never go to compliance with an EIA. And we're doing that, putting us at risk. Let me tell you something, Charles, and the rest of the audience. If in the United States, they even came close to violating an EIA standard such as a safety limit, they will be shut down. They know it. As a matter of fact, in that same Whiptail public meeting that they had, the specialist from the ERM says that the EIA is basically the Bible and we must follow that. But they're not doing it because they can get away with it in Guyana. Because they can get away with it in Guyana. So we've got to have strong oversight, meaning, an EPA with a backbone. Exxon is running EPA. I'm not exaggerating, Charles. I am not exaggerating. We had set up, besides that 36-member unit, we had set up a major training program where we were going to sponsor people to go to university, come back and spend 4 years. All of that has been abandoned. There is not a single person at the EPA with 1 hour training in petroleum engineering or petroleum science. Not a single person. Imagine that. The EPA is supposed to be the oversight body, and there's not a single individual after 4 years at the EPA with a single hour training in petroleum.
Ines, you're listening to Dr. Vincent Adams, the former head of the EPA, on OGGN, or Talk with OGGN Guyana. You're listening to the 99.1, 99.5 FM, and on YouTube and Facebook. Dr. Adams, it's very, what you're telling us to the nation today, coming into the Christmas season, it's really depressing. And I hope the people of Guyana can finally wake up from their slumber and take what is actually theirs. Recently, the Attorney General, as you know, went with the president to St. Vincent, and he said, I'm quoting, he said, many would have seen that President Maduro had with him at the meeting several volumes of documents. Many of those were a compilation of public statements made on this matter, critical commentaries on the operation of Exxon EGGPL, and the several legal proceedings filed in relation thereto, all extracted from the local media. These are materials which Venezuela is using to bolster their narrative. Whatever weight is placed upon them, they certainly do not and will not assist Guyana in any form or fashion, close quote. The Attorney General therefore urged, and I quote again, those who wish to travel this road by making such statements or taking such actions must now become alive to this consequential reality, end of quote. How would you respond to the AG statement?
If it hadn't been so serious, it would have been just laughable. Okay? Now, I want the Attorney General to identify one thing that anybody has said that could be used by Maduro in making his case. I want him to identify one, just anything. Is it flaring? Is it dumping of water? Is it renegotiation? How is that? What item there? I want him to use. He's a lawyer. Let him go use that as an evidence to bolster Maduro's case. There is none. This here is just a hoax and to distract. This is the same Attorney General who has fought against his own rule of law and his own regulations in the full liability coverage for the people. That's what Maduro would use to say here, we can't even our Attorney General is not even following the rule of the law of the country. So we don't even have a country. So if he wants Maduro to use something, that's what Maduro would use. Maduro is looking at an environmental stuff because Exxon, how is he? I mean, I don't understand I would love to hear the argument in making that some kind of an evidence to bolster Maduro's case. It's absolute nonsense. But here is the scariest part. All of this is the pattern of stifling free speech. You remember even when Judge Kassoon made his decision, the two people that came out and criticized that decision were the vice president. You remember the words that he used? when he criticized how, the judgment itself, and even the attorney general himself started, complaining about the decision and all of that kind of stuff. That's what Maduro could be using, because here the only people who are supposed to implement the laws of the country are going against their own laws. That's what he would be using, not about me or you talking about stopping flaring. That's international. Which country does not stop flaring? Even COP28 and everything else, the old Exxon, the world, even I'm sure Venezuela, because they're part of this whole Chevron and all them, they've got goals to stop flaring, stop dumping water, stop, producing. That's all we're talking about, and to get the best for your people. I don't know what the arrangement Maduro has with Chevron and whichever company is running, but I bet you it's more than 12.5% that he's getting, or 14.5%. So how is he going to use that and say that we are arguing for more money? I mean, it's the most stupid comment, and that's how we should be addressing it, rather than giving any credence to it as if it means something.
And I agree with you. I thought the president would have told Mr. President Maduro, listen, that is what Guyana is. Guyana is a democratic society. People are allowed to say what they want against the government. But at the end of the day, all Guyana is united to defend the Essequibo, period.
That's right.
And that should have put Maduro in his place, not this nonsense that the AG is writing to the people. I mean, this is really, really stupid in my view.
Yeah.
Dr. Adams, I don't run out of time. We only got a few minutes more. Guyana will soon be producing over 600,000 barrels. We know that OPEC countries, which include Russia, control about 53% of the oil market. The IMF said that Saudi Arabia needs about $86 per barrel to balance their budget. Russia needs a high oil price to sustain its war in Ukraine. Given Russia cut its production by almost half, 500,000 barrels, Saudi Arabia cut their production 1.5 million barrels per day. But oil prices continue to drop. What are your thoughts on Venezuela? Remember OPEC's sudden escalation of tension given Guyana increased oil production. You think that has a correlation?
Yeah. Well, the thing about oil that I've learned, and I've been wrong. I remember in 2004, somewhere about there, I was still working with the government US. I went at a press conference. I gave a presentation in Puerto Rico before the Caribbean Media Exchange, and I was one among many scientists who predicted peak oil by a certain time. I think it was 2015 or something. We said oil would start coming down, except that we did not cater for technology. So I would never do that again. But the point is, there's always cycle. I was in the industry when oil price was heading, it was $150 or $160 a barrel, and we were projecting it to be $200 a barrel. I was with Amoco, American Oil Company, which is British Petroleum, and we were spending money like drunken sailors because we were expecting that. And then within a couple of years, it dropped to $10 per barrel.
It went negative at one period of time. One day it went negative.
That's right. So all it takes is one incident, just one incident, and everything can change. Look, this whole thing with Venezuela, and this is one of the incidents. When Russia invaded Ukraine, what happened? You hear all these governments decide to put pressure on Russia, cut off gas and this and that, and then because now Russia cannot, their oil can't get their energy cannot get to Europe. Europe is in a bad shape. So guess what that for? It changed geopolitics. Biden now had to come back to Venezuela and say, here, you know what, I'm going to work with you, because Venezuela, I think, is like 90% of their revenue comes from oil. I'm going to work with you. All I need for you to do is conduct free and fair election. So that's how this election come for next year. And then Chevron has come back into the mix, and so the geopolitics change all the time. So it's almost impossible to predict. So all my years in the industry, I've stopped trying to predict, because all it takes is one incident. And here's the other thing: God forbid, if Mr. Trump gets back into office, who knows what can happen? because this guy is the number one transactionalist in the whole world. And what he would see, because remember that this Trump guy, he loves strong men, and he and Putin, they've got seems to be a close relationship, and the only thing he would see is Venezuela has in its reserve 304 billion barrels of oil. Guess how many barrels Guyana has? 11 or maybe 15 eventually. So that's all you would see. So who do you think, where do you think you would start aligning to, in my opinion? So that's what we got to be worried about. So I stopped predicting.
Yeah, Dr. Adams, thank you so much for your time. Time is running out on us. We really have to close now, but anything quickly in the last couple of seconds?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be with the folks, but the whole point is we have got the people, not you and I alone. It's the people, because we only have 2 votes, and the one thing they understand is that people vote, but the people, because it's their own supporters. I bet you, probably just as many supporters on the opposition side as we have the same amount of supporters on the government side who voted for the PPPC. They're all suffering at the lower level, and they're the ones who should be holding this government accountable and stop keeping quiet. Look at the cane cutters. You remember the cane cutters? What happened with the strike that they had? That they even refused to even see them. So those people have got to start letting them understand that if we do not benefit here, we will not vote for you anymore. And they've got to show it by their action.
With that note, we want to wish all of your viewers on radio, on YouTube, and on Facebook a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This will be our last program for 2023. We will be back on the air on the second week in January of 2024. Until then, be safe. Please do not drink and drive, especially you in Guyana. You guys drinking too much and driving. Please do not do that. We want to wish all of you a very, very happy holiday. Until the next time, see you. Goodbye from New York and from Guyana.
Happy holidays to all.
Happy holidays.
Thanks.
Culture Radio, keeping you informed.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Burby's 99.5 FM.